To the Minister, I, the undersigned, a Deputy Coroner for the Northern Territory of Australia, having made inquiries concerning the manner and cause of death of John Michael Robertson at Woodroffe Park, Palmerston, Northern Territory, on Friday the 20th of August 1993. Shortly before 11 a.m. on Friday the 20th of August 1993, two men died in a sewage manhole at Woodroffe Park, on the corner of Woodroffe Avenue and Sirius Street, Palmerston. They were John Michael Robertson, whose employment involved accessing the sewage system, and Michael Samuel Glenn, a bystander who went to Robertson's assistance. Anthony Stephen Hall, a survey technician, and John Michael Robertson, who'd recently been employed on a casual basis as a survey assistance chainman, labourer, were to establish the invert levels of each manhole in Woodroffe Park. This meant they had to measure the depth of each shaft from top to bottom, using a 5-metre-long staff. Hall and Robertson removed the cover from a manhole near Woodroffe Avenue, and on lowering the staff into the manhole, they found it was too short for the purpose. Robertson decided to go down the ladder fixed inside the shaft for a few rungs, despite the stench of sewage emanating from the manhole, whilst Hall held the shaft to pass down to him. Having descended into the shaft, Robertson suddenly began to climb back up the ladder, apparently having realised that the noxious fumes were overpowering him. But before reaching the surface, he collapsed and fell to the bottom of the shaft. Seeing Robertson lying unconscious in the shaft, Hall ran to a nearby house for assistance. He went to the residence of Karen Helen Barr at 150 Woodroffe Avenue. Her flatmate, Michael Samuel Glenn, told Hall that he had first aid experience and went to help Robertson, apparently believing that he'd been injured by slipping and falling into the manhole. In the meantime, Barr telephoned for an ambulance. Hall watched as Glenn entered the shaft. He was almost to the bottom when he began wheezing and coughing, then fell the rest of the way, landing on top of Robertson. Panicking, Hall ran back to Barr's flat and telephoned the police, then returned to the manhole to await their arrival. A St John ambulance crew arrived at the scene at 11:09 a.m. and found Hall standing at the manhole, holding a sheet above his head and attempting to direct air into the shaft. Anxious to attempt to rescue the two persons in the shaft, the ambulance officers, being aware of the probable presence of toxic gases, decided to utilise their 100% oxygen cylinder and mask to gain access to the victims. One officer placed the mask over his face and entered the shaft with the other following him, carrying the gas cylinder, but they were forced to abandon their attempted rescue, realising that the toxins were too strong and the mask ineffective under the circumstances. When police members arrived at the scene shortly afterwards, they realised that the Northern Territory Fire Service and breathing apparatus were required. Meanwhile, they tried to create an airflow by opening another manhole located nearby, but were unable to raise the cover. On arrival at the scene at 11:19 a.m, Northern Territory Fire Service officers prepared to enter the shaft, but senior firefighter Douglas Watley found that the hole was not wide enough for both himself and his air tank, requiring him to remove the tank and have it lowered behind him on a line. At the bottom of the shaft, he located Glenn lying on his back without any detectable vital signs. When Glenn was lifted from the shaft by those above using a rescue line, Watley found Robertson lying on his left side with most of his face submerged in effluent. At about 11:30 a.m, the attendance of Work Health Authority investigators was requested by the police. The attending work health officers obtained a positive indication of flammable gas around the manhole cover, which had been replaced. The manhole cover was then removed and a cripple gas detector was lowered approximately 400 millimetres into the shaft. A hydrogen sulfide concentration of 48 parts per million was obtained. The oxygen concentration was less than 1%, and an off-scale reading for flammable gas was obtained. Oxygen levels of less than 18% are considered unsafe for humans. Loss of consciousness may be experienced at oxygen concentrations of between 6 to 10%. Below 6%, death may occur within 1 minute, and below 2%, unconsciousness is immediate. Hydrogen sulfide acts on the central nervous system and can cause respiratory paralysis if in high concentration. At the concentration found, it acts as an irritant. The flammable gas detected was presumed to be methane, a normal byproduct of decomposing sewage, as is hydrogen sulfide. The major hazards associated with methane are its flammability and its ability to displace oxygen from the atmosphere.